We'll call the Board of Public Works meeting Monday, April 4th to order. Number 2, approval of minutes of March 14th. Mr. Fisher, second by Mr. Rosadich. Comments, corrections? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. We have no citizens here, so we'll move to number 4. Approval of proposed changes to Chapter 16 Plumbing Code of the Municipal Code, presented by Brian Dillinger, Plumbing Inspector. Brian.
All right, good afternoon. We did a complete rewrite of the plumbing code. Last time we touched it was like 2 years ago. We did a few little updates, couple policies that we put into the code, but most of it was hyperlinking, trying to get some the state statutes hyperlinked in. But there really hasn't been much changes. Codes was touched back in 1982 was the original date it was adopted. It used to be ILR, Industry, Labor, and Human Relations, and it changed to Department of Commerce, and now it's DSPS. So just bringing all the updates. So we ended up going through and I basically rewrote the whole code, and we're trying to make it and align it with our building code. There's 4 different articles. Some of the biggest changes, the last time we did it, we entered in some engineering drawings, but to put the drawings into the code, if they make any changes, then we have to come back through this whole process to update them and everything. So we opted to pull them drawings out and just reference them. Another one was addressing the lead and galvanized water services, becoming a big thing. Lead it's pretty much going to be, you have lead, it's going to be taken out. And it's coming down from the DNR. They're pushing, talking with utilities. They're drafting an ordinance to where it's going to be required to change. So I thought I'd kind of get ahead of the game and put it into the plumbing code. Basically, in the plumbing code, if you have a galvanized or lead water service, if it breaks or it's leaking or something, that it's automatic replacement. There's no repairs. A lot of things is to get uniformity. If you looked in the old Chapter 16, it bounced you around from, you start out with a water service, then you go to the unsanitary installations and the sump pumps and then the sewer work. And so it was kind of jumping all over the board. So I kind of made everything into 4 different articles to try and organize it. And more hyperlinks, code sections. I mean, we reference, and we're going to adopt the state plumbing code. But then we also have our own codes as far as sewer work, how to connect to the mains, what has to be replaced, why it's going to be replaced, our policies. One of the big things was the Swiderski Apartments is what really drafted this one in, was crossing property lines. They wanted to take their private interceptor main sewer and connect it to their existing apartments. Well, there's parcel lines there, so if they would ever sell their new proposed additions, the 6 duplexes or 4 duplexes, they wouldn't be able to do that because if the sewer crosses the property line. And they made a point that, well, we didn't see anything in your code, so I kind of, I'm like, all right, we have to address it, even though each parcel is supposed to have their own sewer, but it really isn't specified in the code saying that it can't cross property lines. Well, this one here states it out. And that's in section 16-13. So let's see what else.
So was that in, did they have to do that, or is it grandfathered before you, Swiderski?
No, I talked with them when they were doing the development, and I basically told them that if you ever want to sell it, you're not going to be able to because the sewers are crossing. So they re-engineered, designed everything. So it's set up now where nothing is crossing the property lines, but I thought it needs to be in writing or somebody down the road in the future is gonna challenge it. That's about all I have. We worked hard on it, and I would recommend, Public Works and Development Services recommends to send it to council for approval. And if anybody has any questions,
How about a motion? Motion by Mr. Fire, second by Mr. Marshfield. Questions? Seeing none, all in, Dan, did you have something? Go ahead.
A question, but not a question, just two things. One, Brian put a lot of work into this and went through it several times. So it's a good job, Brian, to get this all done, and I wanted to recognize him for that. And then second, a lot of times when we do ordinance changes, we like to show you the red line version, but because this was a complete redo and reorganization and improving how it was laid out, there really was no way to show the red line. So the packet tonight has both the old version and the new version, if you wanted to get into the details. But if you have questions as this moves forward, Brian's happy to answer those, but that's it.
Okay. Last time, anybody else? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
yep.
Okay, number 5, award bid for 2022 asphalt paving contract presented by Dan Connect, Director of Public Works. Dan.
Okay, thank you. Bids were opened for our asphalt paving program on March 11th. We, as always, get the one bid from American Asphalt, and this year's bid total is $1,821,645. As we expected, the prices were significantly higher than last year. We had some indication that was going to be the case. But even so, bid results do exceed our available budget. This was mentioned during our discussion on ARPA funding options, and we've suggested using about $120,000 of ARPA funds to help balance the budget to get our projects done this year. And we are suggesting that one project be delayed. That is Ash Avenue from 5th Street to 9th Street. And it's more of an assessment of the sanitary sewer that's necessary versus the funding issue. But like on all of our projects, when we get to the construction year, we review the underground utilities to see what repairs or improvements might be necessary. And in this case, the main sanitary sewer main on Ash is in decent shape. Some of it's been lined ready. But we have some laterals that need attention where the connection comes into the main. And initially we thought maybe we could replace the main and all the laterals, which turns into a pretty large project. And we've backed away from that a little bit and want to reassess other trenchless options to try to deal with that. So long story short, we're suggesting that project be delayed so we can further evaluate the sewer. So with that, the bulk of the asphalt paving contract is for our asphalt paving on overlay streets and mill in place program. We also have the 17th Street project in there and this Green Acre Subdivision project, which is coming up. The budget for the asphalt program is just over 1.7 million, and that includes this asphalt bid plus our staff time and equipment. We prepare those projects for paving. We also bid some citywide asphalt patching, and there's a couple of parks projects. Wildwood Park, the Zoo Road is proposed to be done in the Prospect Wayside. So in the memo, you see the breakdown of projects. And I've also attached a spreadsheet of all those streets that will be done this year. You can see how that all shapes up in the individual costs for those projects. I would point out that on the asphalt paving program, we're paving about 2.8 miles of streets this year. If we add in the work on 17th Street, that's a total street improvement of about 3.2 miles. That compares to 3.6 miles last year. We've had this kind of target of 4 miles a year. We haven't met that in the last few years, just as inflation and ability to fund these projects keeps us hold us back a little bit. We're a little bit short of our target again this year, but at least we're making progress with a major street reconstruction and still maintaining a solid asphalt paving program. The last thing I'll mention is the Green Acre subdivision. This is for the asphalt portion only. The primary contract for that work is still, needs to be out for bid yet. We're working on getting that project out for bid. If for some reason that contract doesn't get awarded, then obviously this wouldn't be done either. So with that, the recommendation is to approve the American Asphalt bid in an amount not to exceed budgeted funding and authorize execution of a
Motion? Motion by Mr. Rosendich, second. Mr. Fire, questions? Mr. Fisher?
I'm supportive of this. I just have kind of one question, and that is with the 15 to 20% increase in cost, do you see that over the next couple of years, we're going to see even more increased cost on our asphalt paving project?
It's hard to say. If you look back over the 10-year history, we have seen some spikes and then some years of little or no increase. In fact, one year we saw a decrease. I think our timing this year wasn't great because we had this out for bid right as fuel prices were on the rise, and so there was a lot of uncertainty and maybe a little more risk reflected in this bid price. So future years, we always expect some increase, but I would expect it to level out at some point. How quickly, fuel prices stabilize and so forth, hard to say, but I would expect it to level out. We always have inflation though, so if we ever wanted to get back to the 4 miles a year target, we'd have to bump up our annual funding allocation for it. And it's been tough to do in the CIP. Been trying to maintain a limited amount of borrowing each year. But if the priority is to hit that 4 mile target, we'd have to bump that up.
So my next question will be, if I can, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
What would we have to bump it up to get to the 4 mile?
In our 5-year CIP plan, which will come to the council in May, I'm adding 100,000 a year. It doesn't, it's a big number, of course, but it doesn't get you a whole lot extra, but we got to start doing something. So over the course of that 5-year plan, I think we have about 10.5 million in there. So it's a big number. It's just there's a lot of needs.
Okay. And then my last question is, it looks like American Asphalt was the only one that bid. Can you give some background? Why is it? Because it seems like they're the only bid. Do we know why?
I think the way the asphalt industry is, they're the only one that services this area and that can manage a large contract like this. There are some smaller asphalt pavers that do driveways and smaller type stuff, but to manage a contract of this size, they're the only one that covers this area.
So really what you're saying is they have a monopoly on the business. Thank you.
I would just say, Dan, you can jump in on this. Over the years, I've asked that you compared that with what other cities are paying that American Asphalt doesn't provide. And from what I understand, it's been always really.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know if you're getting the best price when there's only one bidder. But for the most part, our cost increases have, kind of mirrored inflation. This year's a bit of an anomaly with the major increase. But over the course of time, it's been a pretty consistent and not an excessive annual increases.
Anybody else? Mr. Fire?
Don't the small pavers, they still get the asphalt from American Asphalt anyway? They're the only ones around here that make up the asphalt, correct? I would think.
Right.
They have to go over to Was or wherever they pick it up. So it's basically, the only thing is the maintenance for the people that are charging for labor is the only.
Yeah, I believe they do. Wood County, I think, has their own asphalt plant, but
they won't let us
otherwise, American's the only producer. Yep.
Mr. Turchi? Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, like you were saying with Wood County, with Act 10, we basically were told we cannot work with the county anymore for doing asphalt paving. So at one point, the city was doing comparison and shopping and just trying to split some of that work up. That's no longer available.
Mr. Fisher?
So I'll confess, it was kind of a loaded question, but the reason I asked that is it bothers me that we have a county highway department that could be providing service to local municipalities, and the state of Wisconsin is favoring keeping it, in my opinion, a monopoly, where American Asphalt is the only one that gets the business. If all of a sudden the city of Marshfield wanted to work with the highway department, maybe we could get some of these prices down. But that's not happening because of state law. So that's why if I seem a little over the top, I'm frustrated with the state of Wisconsin. Thank you.
Anybody else? Tom?
Let's just use, for example, we did just do a cost comparison of some of the bid items of 17th Street to see whether or not there would be any type of comparison on using concrete versus asphalt on that project. And yet you can show that there's probably a benefit to, or maybe cheaper to do when you do the life cycle cost analysis of that. But the initial cost is what keeps us from getting things built when we're fighting that cost. So that's one of the reasons that 17th moved up, is we actually moved it as being a concrete street to an asphalt street because it then fits in with the budget.
Anybody else? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those against, motion carries. Number 6, approval of agreement for asphalt rejuvenating, surface treatments for 2022, presented by Dan Connect, Director of Public Works. Dan?
That's a good segue from asphalt paving to asphalt maintenance. And, of course, when we put that investment into our new pavements, we want to make sure we maintain those pavements. In 2020, we started using this asphalt rejuvenating surface treatment, and it's a little bit different than the traditional chip seal that you're all familiar with. Chip seal would normally go on 5 to 7 years after a pavement is placed, and then every 7 to 10 years after that. The concept of this rejuvenating agent is to put it on while the asphalt is still new and before it has some years of deterioration. So typically 1 year after it's paved, this Reclamite is the name of the product, gets put on the new pavements. And that can reduce the effects of aging and the exposure to sun and that kind of thing. You may recall a presentation from the vendor a few years back explaining how that. So we did it in 2020 with a small-ish amount, and it's kind of a trial basis. Then we had a pretty large application last year, about 171,000 square yards, doing all of our newer pavements and then trying to backtrack a little bit on some pavements that hadn't been chip sealed yet. This year we have a little bit smaller program, but again, doing all of the 2021 work and catching the older pavements dating back a few years that are still in decent shape yet that would be eligible for this product. Last year we did about $165,000 worth. This year, 145,000 or so. The cost of this treatment is less than half of the cost of a traditional chip seal. So we can spread the dollars a little bit further, and it provides that surface treatment again before the pavement sees the extensive aging. So we'd like to continue doing this to develop a track record on how it's working. We would recommend your approval of this agreement for application of the Reclamite, and then authorize execution of a
Motion. Mr. Fisher, second by Mr. Rosen. Questions? Mr. Rosen.
Is this the same material? We had a presentation, it was like a year ago, though. Is this the same thing, or that was
I
different?
think so. I think it was, Dan. I don't think it was.
That was like a new process, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's not this, or is that this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Number 7, approval of dedication of right-of-way and easements on Lincoln Avenue, 5th Street to Adler Road, presented by Dan Connect, Director of Public Works. Dan.
Thank you. We've talked about this project recently as well. Lincoln Avenue, 5th to Adler is an STP urban program. We've gotten funding through the State Department of Transportation and the federal grant program. When we do that, we have to secure the right-of-way necessary, whether that's easements, temporary construction easements, or permanent easements along the project. In this case, along Lincoln Avenue, there are 5 parcels that are owned by the city. So we can simply dedicate that right of way with a resolution or a quitclaim deed versus going through the more formal acquisition process. So the map in your package shows where the city parcels are. The four along the west side here are part of the city subdivision. Those are actually being marketed for sale, so we want to get this done in a timely manner so those sales aren't impacted by this pending action. Then the fifth one is up here on the north end of the city greenway. And these again would involve some strip acquisition of lands on the west side for this proposed trail that'll follow the west side, a couple of permanent easements for stormwater structures, and some temporary easements for grading and matching in. And on this parcel, by the greenway, temporary easement, grading and matching in slopes. So in your packet is this quitclaim deed that would dedicate the rights of ways and easements necessary for the project. The legal description for all those parcels follows. So the recommended action is to approve the quitclaim deed for dedication of this right of way and easements and authorize execution.
Motion? Mr. Varsho, second by Mr. Fire. Question? Mr. Rosendich.
Thank you. I know in the future the bike trail is supposed to hook up with potentially go all along that way, right? Is that correct? Is it going to go? It's planned to go on the west side, right? So how does that affect the residents that live almost in that little farmhouse area? It's just that one house in front of the church. Do we have to do the same thing when we want to put that trail in?
Yes, so the trail will go all the way from the Adler Road Trail down to Fifth Street along the west side. And the parcels that are not owned by the city, we will have to acquire a strip of land from them, from the church parcel here at the corner, the old farmhouse, and then the corner at Fifth and Lincoln as well. And if you remember, we have MSA on board to help us with that acquisition process. They're just getting started with that now. If you drive the corridor, you'll see some stakes out there that show where the limits are of the easements and the right-of-way purchases. And so they'll be meeting with those property owners soon.
So my question is why wouldn't we do it all at one time right now if we have to make that acquisition for this land? And if we're going to do the trail, because we're going to have to do it all over again, correct? To acquire that little land to put that trail in front of that home?
No, that's what this process is.
But
So
isn't that,
what I'm showing on the map here is just the city-owned parcels.
okay, so it's still going to go in front of that house?
Yes.
Even there, okay.
Right.
Because I'm just looking at the blue that I'm seeing here.
Yeah, the blue is just highlighting the city-owned parcels and what part of, part of this action tonight.
Okay, perfect. That's all I want.
Anybody else? I just have a question, Dan. So when we do the trails and the city's putting in, it's not like the sidewalks where we assess the property owner for that. So that's a difference.
Right, yeah, the benefit to the property owner is that they don't pay an assessment for the trail and they don't maintain the snow removal or surface maintenance on the trail. That's all covered by the city.
So that's a plus when we want to put trails in along other places. Thank you. Okay, we had a motion, Dan, right?
Yep.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Number 8, approval of certified survey map and dedication of right-of-way on Yellowstone Drive, presented by, guess who, Dan Connect, Director of Public Works. Dan.
Thank you. We're getting near the end here. So we had a couple of certified survey maps for your review and approval on our agenda tonight. The first one here is on Yellowstone Drive. And this certified survey map was done to establish the boundaries of parcel that the city will be acquiring from the Board of Regents for future industrial park operations. As part of that CSM review, we determined that additional right-of-way needs to be dedicated along the north side of Yellowstone Drive here. This resolution in your packet tonight simply acknowledges the city's acceptance of that right-of-way through the certified survey map, and I'd recommend your approval.
Motion, Mr. Fisher, second by Mr. Varsho. Questions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Number 9, approval of certified survey maps and dedication of right-of-way for Prairie Run subdivision, presented by Dan Connect, Director of Public Works. Dan.
All right, one more time here. So in the Prairie Run subdivision, they're modifying some lots and updating some of their plans for that subdivision. And this new lot configuration is dedicating a little bit of extra right-of-way for Prairie Drive. And that, again, this resolution in your packet would acknowledge the city's acceptance of that right-of-way. I'd recommend your approval this.
Motion. Mr. Rosendich, second. Mr. Fire, questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Number 10, approval of preliminary resolutions for 2022 special assessments project, presented by Tom Churchy, city engineer. Tom.
All right, as we get into the process of getting our mill in place projects going, we're having a public informational meeting here coming Wednesday evening on these projects. But the process for special assessments begins with the preliminary resolution. So we're requesting that you approve preliminary resolution 2022-08 for Balboa Avenue, 17th Street to 14th Street, Cedar Avenue, Daggy Street to Grant Street, Chapel Street from Adams Avenue to North Hills Avenue, Cleveland Street from Cedar Avenue to Peach Avenue, Daggy Street from Willow Avenue to Hume Avenue, Grant Street from Peach Avenue to Cedar Avenue, Inman Avenue from Daggy Street to Becker Road, Jefferson Street from Schmidt Avenue to the cul-de-sac, McMillan Street from Lincoln Avenue to 1,320 feet west, Franklin Street from Maple Avenue to Peach Avenue, Cherry Avenue from First Street to Second Street, Arlington Street from Lincoln Avenue to Columbus Avenue, and Apple Avenue from Daggy Street to Becker Road. And this, after approval of this, we would bring it to the common council for final approval.
Motion. Mr. Fisher, second. Both of you. You want each one half? Mr. Varsho, questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Let's see, plan review for Green Acres Estates, first edition subdivision, presented by Tom Churchy, city engineer. Tom.
All right, this is for the Green Acres subdivision, which we were talking about recently. What's going to be constructed here is we're going through the typical section, which is a 28-foot face-to-face roadway with the mountable curb and gutter section. The portion of 21st Street has a multi-use path, 10 feet wide, that'll be located on the south side of the roadway. And the remaining roads will be just 28 feet face-to-face and graded for future sidewalk if ever desired to put in. One note with the 28 feet face-to-face, these roads will get posted no parking on one side. And that's kind of how it is constructed in the 20th Street and Green Acres Drive. They're 28 feet face-to-face for those roads. Moving to the second page, this is the overall layout of the project. There's going to be 60 lots made available by this project. And this is just kind of an overview. I'll get into some of the minor details as we go through these. Next page is basically the entrance from Washington Avenue onto 21st Street. So we have 21st Street at Washington Avenue. There'll be an asphalt path on the south side. You'll notice that it's kind of a little bit closer to the curb for that first lot because we don't have enough right of way for to keep it all the way out. And then between the first lot and the second lot, we end up moving it over to the right of way line of the remaining parcels going further to the east. It basically remains that way, continuing past Maddie Drive or Maddie Circle. And on this map, Maddie is spelled incorrectly. We have made some comments to the designer on this that they are going to be making some changes to this project, and I'll explain some of those as we go through too. The next page, we are on to Herkert, which is actually on this drawing. It's called, can I read it up? Megan's Way, but that's actually going to be Herkert Drive. And then as we get to Apple Avenue, you have to excuse me, I had to turn my other glasses in because there's an error with them. So I'm using some old glasses that can't read very well.
Hey, welcome to our world.
So, but then we have Aspen Avenue as we continue further to the east. And then the project will take and connect up with Green Acres Drive, which is already existing. The trail will end just about the curve as it moves up to Green Acres Drive, and at that point, we'll plan some type of future project with Parks and Rec to continue that over to Hume Avenue. Following to Maddie's Circle, this is the east portion or west portion of Maddie's Circle as it continues down and around. There's nothing very much out of the ordinary on this portion of the project. As you reach to the bottom, this is the low point of Maddie's Circle, and you'll notice on the right side of the drawing, it says sheet 29 through here. Sanitary and sanitary and storm sewer have to drain through to continue with the flow of water and sanitary in this area. Then we move to the east side of Maddie's Circle, continuing back up to 21st Street. Nothing really out of the ordinary here. Then this is the section between Maddie's Circle and Herkert Drive, where we have storm sewer and sanitary sewer coming through an easement in the property because this is the lower portion of the parcel. And then we have Herkert's Drive, which then continues from 21st Street down and around and connects up with Aspen Avenue. Now, as you take a look at the intersection of Aspen Avenue and Herkert, we will actually be ending the roadway at Herkert, not continuing down to the south, and I'll show you that in a future drawing. This is the intersection of Aspen Avenue at 21st Street, and the next one is the final portion of Aspen Avenue as it hits Herkert, but the kind of J that you see at the end will not be constructed. It'll just end at Herkert Drive at this time. The next drawings are basically showing some of the grading plan for the site, plus some ditches that will be constructed in order to keep the stormwater between the properties and get them into the storm sewer system. In the block 7, there's a storm sewer inlet on the backside in the properties that will allow that stormwater to enter. On the other one, it'll actually go down to an existing ditch that is there already. That protects the properties to the south. And as we move further to the other block, block 9, the drainage way will continue down and be picked up by a storm sewer system on the private property and then into the city system. If you take a note on the other side of the street there, you'll have lots 7, 6, 5, 4, and the ones that are hidden by an existing pond. I'm going to go to the next page. The existing pond for this site is going to actually get filled. The material that's in there will get removed, and this pond's actually going to get filled in. It'll create one more lot that's buildable on the north side of this intersection of Aspen and 21st. The intention is to then install sanitary sewer services on those lots so that it can be developed, and add one more further to the east so that a future park can be built in that area. You'll notice if you go to the next page, we have quite an oblong shape detention basin. From the comments that were created by Tim and myself, we are going to eliminate lot 7 and enlarge the basin so that it doesn't extend back and through behind the properties, and have one larger basin that will take and address the requirements of this subdivision. This basin is basically designed for the entire subdivision, including the previous development, because the pond that's existing only was designed for the previous development. So this will be a regional basin for this entire development. Therefore, I'd recommend approval of the plans as submitted. And are there any questions?
Let's have a motion. Motion by Mr. Rosendich, second by, what's your name? Mr. Fisher. Questions? I just have one last chance, seeing how my time's running out. I heard sidewalks later. Leave it alone, Tom. Okay, are we ready to vote? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Okay, recommended items for future agendas. Dan?
Thank you. I don't have any items for future agendas, but I just wanted to mention, we've talked a lot lately about the STP Urban Program, which is a federal grant program that gives us 80% federal funding with a 20% local match. We've been pretty successful lately on getting projects approved through that program. Just learned last week that Fifth Street here from Chestnut to Oak was approved for the 2023 to 2027 cycle. In that program, we're targeting construction in 2025 for that. So you'll see that come through the CIP with that funding source of STP. That was great news for us.
What's involved, Dan, with applying for the grant? I know you and your staff have done a great job on getting those. What's all involved with that?
It's a pretty straightforward application process. You need a good cost estimate, and that's where these guys put together the numbers on what it's going to cost. And then in the old days, you only got so many projects, and you had to wait your turn until it kind of came around again. More recently, there's a little more money in the program these days, so it seems like we've been getting our projects every time we request. But the key is you have to keep asking for it. And every cycle, you have to submit something. And you could go a few years without getting anything, but you just got to keep at it.
Well, and I just bring that up because the residents really, it really helps them a lot when you get these grants. It cuts down what they have to pay. So our staff is looking out for the residents as much as we can. So thank you and your staff.
It's really become about the only way we can afford to do these major reconstruction projects. Recent ones, again, were the 29th Street reconstruction and Lincoln Avenue, which we've talked about, and now Fifth Street. So without the 80% cost share, it'd be very difficult for us to fund those projects on our own.
Anybody else have anything for future agendas? Otherwise, motion to adjourn, Mr. Rosen, second by Mr. Varsho. Thank you, we are adjourned.